Consumers want to know the facts about the products they buy, but America's agricultural landscape is not easy to navigate. Between different companies, scientific advancement, government regulations, advertisement campaigns, and an unhealthy amount of myth and misconception, anyone would be hard-pressed to make sense of it. That's where Real Ag comes in, from the producers who make your food, to the store where you buy the final product, and everything in between. This is Real Ag. Now, here's your host, Kyle Bauer.
This season, we've talked about many factors that affect the food we eat, from beef to pork to wheat and corn, and even the wine we drink. It's obvious the state of Kansas remains a strong influence on the agriculture of the world. Today, we're bringing it all together for you. This is the Real Ag Guide.
Production of Real Ag is made possible by
the Kansas Soybean Commission, the Soybean Checkoff, progress powered by farmers.
Wheat originated in the Middle Eastern part of the world about 10,000 years ago. A bunch of wild grasses crossed over time and gave us our modern day bread wheat. So that's the origination point of the plant. Wheat has been grown here in Kansas for well over 100 years, back to the mid-1800s. Wheat, amazingly, is a very similar plant to what it was 10,000 years ago. What we've done in modern wheat breeding the last few decades is increase yield of that wheat plant. So when a farmer harvests the plant, we want more bushels, more grain per acre harvested. And we've also bred it for higher quality for bread baking. So when we mill that wheat kernel into wheat flour, we want it to make a good loaf of bread. And so those are the two factors that have really changed about modern day wheat.
Wheat is one of the top sources of nutrition worldwide. So it has a huge impact on human health and nutrition and feeding people all over the globe.
Wheat is really a very healthy product. So there's really three parts to the wheat kernel. The outside, which is the bran, which is where the fiber comes from. The inside white chalky part, which is the endosperm, and that's what wheat flour is made of. And the germ of the plant, many people are familiar with wheat germ, which is very healthy. In fact, it's one of the healthiest foods in the world. It's full of good vitamins and minerals and healthy oils. When you eat a wheat food, especially whole wheat foods, it's a very nutritious product. And even the wheat breads that are just regular white breads, by law here in the United States, they're fortified with extra vitamins and minerals. So on the nutrition chart, wheat is a very healthy food. We use every part of the wheat kernel when we're making whole wheat bread. When we're making just white wheat bread, which just uses all-purpose flour you would buy in the grocery store, that's just the endosperm, the middle part of that wheat kernel.
Very little Kansas corn is exported. Most of our corn here is fed to the livestock industry right here in Kansas. But over 20 years ago, the reason I got so involved in the U.S. Grains Council and export, over 20 years ago, I was raising a fairly short season corn. So I was the first producer to haul new crop corn to our local elevator. The manager was on vacation, and when I brought the corn in, the assistant manager didn't know how to price that corn. So he called the manager, he says, Terry brought some corn in, what's new crop corn worth? And he said, well, it's simple, it's Nebraska corn plus freight, and that's what you pay him. So the light went on in my head thinking, I don't want Nebraska corn competing with my corn. I don't want Iowa corn, Illinois corn competing with my corn. I was involved in the Kansas Corn Commission at that time, and we did a little work with the U.S. Grains Council, but not very much. But as we began to look at the advantages of exports, we realized that we need corn disappearance, whether it's through livestock or whether it's through export. And if we can move more corn from the Corn Belt through the export market, whether it's down the Mississippi River or out the Pacific Northwest by rail, we need that corn to disappear because that adds to my bottom line. And that's where most of the corn will be exported, is either out of Pacific Northwest from north central U.S. or down the Mississippi and out the Gulf region. Every argument that I've ever heard or seen or read that talks about the dangers of feeding corn, you can counter with multiple scientific research projects that prove corn is very, very safe. It's without a doubt the most economical feed source for our livestock. So how are you going to feed livestock if you don't have corn or if you don't have grain sorghum?
Well, I think a lot of it is the misconception around GMOs and the way GMOs affect humans and affect everybody that's out there. You know, I think the misinformation about GMOs is what most people need to really study for themselves, so to speak. There's a lot of misinformation out there about GMOs, and but to know that GMOs are there to make a better product, to make a better environment, cleaner, safer, healthier foods. And I think the way that I always view it, from a producer standpoint of view, we have children as well. And if it wasn't safe for our families and our children, we wouldn't feed it to them. And we're feeding the exact same stuff, the same food sources that the average consumer is. And if I didn't feel it was safe for my children, I wouldn't give it to them. So I think the misconception around GMOs is a big one.
I've had the opportunity to speak to a lot of audiences about GMOs, and I stress that when I first began talking about that, I use the term enhanced. I talk about genetically enhanced corn or genetically enhanced soybeans, because that's really what we've done. We've taken what happens in nature. Nature's been evolving forever, and we always have grains that have been changing naturally. And all we've done through genetic enhancement or through genetic modification is speed up the process and maybe encourage the process to go into a specific direction. We wouldn't have herbicide resistance without genetic modification. We wouldn't have corn borer resistance or rootworm resistance without that. For me as a farmer, it goes back to my bottom line. Because of the herbicide resistance, because of the insect resistance, the corn borer resistance primarily is a trait we need. It allows me to have protection to that, to those insects that I would only get through chemical sprays, which is very, very costly. So I can bring that resistance in with the seed, and I don't have to worry about ever having to spray for corn borer. And that's huge to me. It helps. It's much less expensive using that biotech trait. It's much better for the environment because I'm not having to spray toxic chemicals on the top of my corn.
Crop rotation is necessary agronomically because it helps control disease, insects, it reduces weed pressure, it improves soil health. So if you plant the same crop, say continuous wheat year after year after year, that wheat is food for disease and insects, and so you start to build those populations to a point where they can reduce yield. So as you introduce other crops, then you reduce those populations so that they don't reduce yield, or you don't have to buy inputs to control them. And so by rotating, you actually increase your yield and decrease your dependency on inputs.
Crop rotation serves a number of roles. In many ways, it doesn't matter what else is going on in the system, but if you're rotating the crops, you can break up disease cycles. So if you've got the same crop in the field every year, some diseases reside in the crop residues or in the soil. And so that pest or that pathogen is present, and its host plant will be there every year, and it just builds up over time. Soybean cyst nematode is a good example of this. You plant susceptible soybean varieties in a field year after year, this nematode builds to levels that will severely impact production. And so rotating away from soybeans allows those nematode numbers to drop. You can come back to soybeans in a year or two or three and have successful production. Same thing applies to some insects, things like that. Crop rotation is very important when we think about our no-till systems, where we're not tilling the ground either ever or very infrequently. Because in those systems, one of the reasons anyway, is because there you have the residue on the surface. You're not burying the residue, and so those pests can survive even easier. And so it's more important to rotate to different crops or different types of crops.
If you want to learn viticulture and you want to learn how to grow grapes, you generally do that once you've decided that you like wine enough to devote yourself to the growing of the grape, and or strictly for money. But I don't think most people are doing it strictly for money. They're doing it for the enjoyment of what they get, the social interaction. We have friends come out, we do this together. I've gotten to have great friends through this, my interactions with people that like wine, that like grape growing, and that like fruit growing. And so it's really more of an avocation that you enjoy doing because you like the associations that you make as a result of that. And so I think it's worth the time, and I think that Kansas, if it decides, if people in the state of Kansas all of a sudden decided they'd like to start growing grapes and join associations that did that, they'd have a lot of fun doing it. I grew up in the farming business milking cows. My dad was a dairy farmer, and so this was just a pasture for the cows when I was a kid. So my mom and dad started planting trees out here, built a house. When I came back after living in Sonoma County for 11 years, I decided I will grow grapes in Kansas. And so we started planting here, and that's how we ended up with a vineyard on an old cow pasture here in Kansas.
You can do lots of things with soy products, soy flour, and tofu, and just a lot of things for if you have a vegetarian. Soy is very high in digestible amino acids that aren't available, that our body doesn't produce, and that aren't really readily available in any other foods that we eat. So it's a great source of those easily digestible amino acids, and it's also a source of fiber in your diet. So diet-wise, those are two real pluses of it. Well, from the economic side, it's one of our biggest exports. It's huge in our balance of trade for the amount of soybeans that are exported. You know, probably last year about $20 billion worth of soy exports. And you know, from the biodiesel industry part of that, there's a lot of jobs, and most of those jobs from biodiesel plants are in rural America, in small town America. All of the other products from soybean oil and other industrial products, you know, are somewhat help supply a lot of jobs, create a lot of jobs in all over the country. On the food side, you would have, from soybean oil, you would have mayonnaise and cooking oils and a lot of salad dressings. And from the lecithin, which is a part of soybeans, you have pharmaceuticals, a lot of new products. They're coming. Lecithin is a byproduct of the biodiesel process, so suddenly there's a lot of it available, a lot more than used to be. So they have been working a lot on developing new uses for lecithin. Some of the products that from the lecithin, you might say, you know, some of your some lubricants are made from that. Some of the cosmetics. They use some lecithin in a candy bar that keeps the chocolate and the cocoa from separating. So that would be something most people would not know. I did not know for a long time, but there are a lot of, in the food industry, and I think in other industry too, they use small amounts or use that as a binder, so to speak, or product to enhance some things. And on the meal side, you know, for livestock feed is the biggest user of soybean meal. In the United States, they're really the soybean producer's #1 customer for use especially in hogs and chicken.
Pork has really changed in the last 25 years. You know, the pig that your grandparents probably raised on the farm is not the pig that we have today. I mean, they used to want pigs to carry a lot of fat because they used the fat for cooking. I mean, they rendered the fat for lard, so, you know, because grandmas used a lot of lard in cooking and making pie crusts and those sorts of things. But, you know, we kind of learned that that's probably not the healthiest source of fat. And so, you know, through genetic improvements, the pork is actually a lot leaner than it was back then. And today, the pork tenderloin is actually just as lean as the skinless chicken breast.
The nutrition of pork comes in a variety of different aspects when we talk about the overall qualities that it brings. We often talk about a portion size being a 3-ounce meat portion, and that'll bring approximately 1/3 of the daily protein requirement that we need. In addition, pork is very rich in B vitamins. In fact, it'll bring approximately 1/3 of the B vitamins that we need on a daily basis. In addition, trace minerals such as zinc and copper, manganese, those are all brought with as well. One of the aspects and what's really changed about pork over the last several decades is that it's become a much leaner product. And when I say leaner, just less fat in the actual muscle or on the outside. One of the things that as pork genetics have changed as swine farmers have improved the quality of pork, one of the things has been its emphasis on producing a leaner product. We want to produce more lean muscle for food, as well as have that leaner product that does have a less total amount of fat that is consumed by consumers.
We import a lot of beef into this country. We're one of the top 3 or 4 beef importing countries in the world. We talk about what beef, you say, well, we're one of the largest beef producing countries in the world. Why do we actually need to import beef? Well, our beef in the United States is very specific. We have a high fat content beef and because of that marbling and the flavor that's associated with that product is actually desired across the world. If you go to any corner of the world and actually consume beef in a high-end steakhouse, it's all U.S. beef that's sold because our product is very unique and has a lot stronger flavor and more desirable flavor than in countries across the world. As a result of that high marbled product that we produce, we need to be able to have a leaner grinding beef to put into our beef supply. So when we go to the grocery store, we have the option of purchasing 73% lean, 85% lean, 90% lean ground beef. And so what we're able to do is countries that actually almost exclusively grass-fed their cattle, whether they're from South America, countries like Argentina, Brazil, Uruguay, or Australia or New Zealand, we're able to purchase cheaper, leaner beef products from those countries to blend with our current domestic supply to actually create the ideal lean points. And that actually helps produce and reduce the cost and overhead of our ground beef products as well. From an import standpoint, if we look at inspection, once any meat that's going to come into the United States and go into the U.S. food supply must be inspected by U.S. Inspection agencies. So the USDA has inspectors at those facilities inspecting product that's going to be exported to the United States. So the product that may come from South America or Australia undergoes the same exact inspection process as the beef that's actually produced here domestically. We have the ability to track beef all the way back to the processing facility. Currently, we don't have an animal identification plan in place in the United States in which we can track a piece of a beef all the way from the producer all the way to the consumer. We can trace it all the way back to the packing plant, however. Within that packing plant, we have what are called lots, and so within a day, most of the time, is what we'd call a production lot. So all the meat that's produced in that day will get labeled with that lot number. And so what would happen is, anytime that beef goes in a box that's got the lot number printed on it, if there's any issues, we can always look that up to determine exactly the source of where all that meat actually came from back to the day it was actually produced. I think the important thing to remember about beef is what a great nutrient source that it actually is. It's a great product. It's one that provides a high level of eating experience. When people think we want to go out and celebrate, we have someone's birthday, someone got a promotion, no one ever says, I want to go have a good piece of chicken for that experience. They all say, we want to go to a good steakhouse to eat. And that's what beef is. Beef is a celebration meat. It is the highest quality protein product that we have, and consumers continuously tell us that. They desire the flavor and taste of beef products. And they should have the confidence to know that when they purchase beef products at retail or at food service, that those meat products are 100% safe to consume. They're healthy for your family to consume. They're really truly a great meat product to actually consume and use.
Antibiotics have a technical definition of a compound that's produced by one living organism to inhibit the growth of another. So typically the antibiotics we've had are formed by a fungus or some type of organism such as that, and inhibits a bacteria. The fluoroquinolones and the sulfas are man-made, totally synthetic. The sulfas are a byproduct of the dye industry, and the fluoroquinolones
came from high throughput screening of substances and then have evolved. But a lot of our modifications are man-made. So for example, we have penicillin. Most food animal producers have probably held a bottle of Procaine Pen-G. And then we have amoxicillin and ampicillin. And so amoxicillin is amino-oxypenicillin, amino and oxy groups chemically added, and ampicillin is aminopenicillin. So they're both ones that are human designed chemical alterations of a naturally produced compound.
From an antibiotic or medication perspective, pigs are naive to various diseases and bacteria just like any other livestock or humans themselves. And so we need antibiotics are very important for the production of healthy, safely consumed meat by consumers. Pigs, again, they need time to get exposure to the different environments so they can develop their immunity. I often refer to it, I have 3 young children, and it never fails. The first week back in school, it happened this year, where my son somehow, we got pneumonia the first week after being exposed back, and he's in 2nd grade. And again, just as humans or any species are naive to certain viruses or bacteria that we pick up and get ill from, pigs are the same way. But there is vaccines that are out there to help prevent, just like we get immunizations as early in our human lives. We can do the same with pigs to help prevent diseases and to help build their immunity for the rest of their productive lives. And so, again, they become very important. When animals get sick, it's our duty, just as we humans take medication to get better, we have an animal welfare obligation to have that animal recover and be as healthy as possible. So we use those medications to get them over any challenges that they have as well.
If we do not do our job for the consumer, the protein industry is consumer driven. And so if our consumers don't like our product, then we don't have any place to go with it. And so it's in our best interest, and today has, unfortunately, the small family farm is starting to kind of go by the wayside, and we're starting to see bigger farmers, bigger ranchers, those things. It is their livelihood. It is an economic driven livelihood. And so if they don't do their part, to produce a safe and wholesome product, to use antibiotics in a correct manner, administer them in a correct manner, at a correct dosage, and make sure that those animals, when they do go to harvest, that they are beyond that slaughter withdrawal or milk withdrawal date, then ultimately it comes back and hurts the industry, which ultimately comes back and hurts them. So I think it is still an economic and a consumer driven to do your job, follow the rules, and do it to the best of your ability.
You could say that everything from the farm to fork is regulated in some aspect. Certainly parts of that are more regulated than others. At this point in time, the first steps in production are the least regulated. So farmer goes out in the field, plants a crop, harvests a crop. That's the least regulated part. As that crop or livestock moves its way into the marketplace, some point of aggregation like a grain elevator or a feed yard, and then goes on into processing. So now it's at a flour mill or an ethanol plant or a beef processing facility, for example. The level of regulation steps up, and then as that moves into the consumer supply chain, so now it's in a grocery store or a restaurant, there's even more regulation there. So all steps experience some sense of it. It's less at the beginning and more at the end. At the Kansas Department of Agriculture, we're involved in a lot of those pieces along the way, and really work every day to balance to make sure we're doing what we need to do from a regulatory standpoint, and we're delivering a safe and wholesome product at the end of the day. But at the same time, we want those businesses to be successful. We want those people to be able to make the product and offer that to the marketplace. And so we balance, this is what we need to do from a regulatory standpoint, but we don't want to inhibit business with that. Ultimately, we are regulated by the governor and the Kansas legislature, and what they tell us to do through executive order, state statute, state regulations, etc. We also have partnerships with federal agencies, typically in the form of contracts, where we say, we will do this work on your behalf. They will pay us to do that. And then we have to meet the obligations of the contract. The obligations of the contract that they issue then are regulated at the federal level by the President and Congress, and then down through the individual agencies. So at the end of the day, the good news is everyone that votes can have a say in how much regulation there is.
The Food and Drug Administration sets rules and regulations for the transportation of, food for human and animal consumption. And, there's also the federal side of the house, whether it's Hazardous Material Safety Administration or Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration. All those could help regulate the food transportation. But like I said, Pipeline Hazardous Material Safety Administration just deals with the hazardous material side of the house, and Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration deals with the transportation by highway with regular stuff, and then the FDA or state health departments or Kansas Department of Health and Environment would also play a part in safe transportation of food as well. But that's generally, should an incident happen on roadside, is when it is when transportation gets involved. I do know there are incidences involving food products and livestock and so forth. Most of the ones I've come across when it deals with livestock, it runs into driver fatigue or driver distraction as to why the crash occurred. In food transportation, it could be that way as well on that one. But also, a 2007 study by FMCSA, or, not really actually by FMCSA, but they asked for that study, said, basically of all the truck-car crash causations, 60% of is about the car's fault, not the truck's fault. So the industry has a 40% window there they can really, work on improving. And of that window, like I said before, fatigue driving or distracted driving really needs to be addressed on the industry side of it, but also on the passenger car side of it as well, because I'm sure you've seen it, people driving and texting, driving on their phone. You might see people that are, nodding off as they're going down the road. So, and the worst thing about that is some of those folks aren't even buckled up.
Without trucks, without transportation, this place is going to stop completely. If you have it in your house, how to get there? Buy a truck. Buy a piece of transportation. Buy a flat truck. Buy an 18-wheel truck. Buy a 10-wheel, whatever. It came to you via a truck. UPS, 60,000 vehicles. Those are trucks. FedEx, those are trucks. Do you think Dylan's down the street here, some little farmer brought him a cow? No, it came by a truck. Or a boat that comes to a truck, or a rail that comes to a truck, but it all ends up on 18 or 10 wheels. It all does. And I know a lot of people, they don't like truck drivers, they don't like transportation, they don't like those huge vehicles slowing them down at 60 miles an hour on Highway 54 or wherever it may be, but slow down, save fuel, I get it, but it's still a truck.
That wraps up this episode of Real Ag. Remember, you can see other programs in the series by going to smokyhillstv.org. Until next time, I'm Kyle Bauer, and this has been Real Ag.
Production of Real Ag is made possible by
the Kansas Soybean Commission, the Soybean Checkoff, progress powered by farmers.